Here are a few photos we took while staying with Olive and Len. We drove down to Hunstanton on the morning of the 5th and stopped off at Mum and Dad's grave at St Lodiger's Church before going to see Ron and Jean. In the afternoon we checked into Sina Warren on Hayling Island for our 4-night break. Here are a few photos we took while at Sina Warren. Through the 25th of April. The photos and video clips of our 2-week cruise around the Avon Ring and the Birmingham Canal navigations are on a separate video. Around 9 o'clock on April the 23rd we said goodbye to Narrowboat Aquamarine. Pat, Gillian and I, along with most of the luggage, crammed ourselves into the car and drove back to Biggin Hill. Yvonne, Mandy and Billy caught a train to Bromley South and then caught a bus to Olive and Len's. In the afternoon Len and I watched some horse racing on the telly and placed a couple of bets. No winners. Ronnie drove up from Hunstanton and arrived about 4 o'clock. We picked up some fish and chips and had a nice dinner at the house. On Saturday morning Joe said goodbye to everyone, went to Gatwick and caught a flight to Anchorage. No, she didn't go by bus. Len drove her to Gatwick. Here's Yvonne picking up her winnings on the Grand National. She bet on Black Appalachie and it came in second at 14-1. Karen and Jasmine and Chris and Sam stopped by in the afternoon to say hi to everyone. Ronnie left about 5 o'clock to drive back to Hunstanton, and here he is saying goodbye to the girls. On Sunday morning, Len drove Yvonne, Mandy and Billy to Gatwick to catch their flight back to Reno. Monday the 25th. We left Olive and Len's around 9 a.m. and drove up to Burton Joyce to visit with Peter and Doreen for a couple of hours. We left them around 3 o'clock and headed for the Derbyshire Peak District. In the middle of nowhere, we came across the Traveller's Rest and decided that this would be our overnight accommodation. This was our fancy bedroom. Tuesday the 27th. We spent the morning driving around the country roads of the scenic Peak District, and in the afternoon we retraced part of last year's cruise on Kimberley Dawn. We're in the Valley of Edale in the Derbyshire Peak District. It's absolutely beautiful. Might be able to hear the sheep in the distance and little lambs. Got a gorgeous day as well. Here are a few shots we took as we retraced our steps on last year's cruise on Kimberley Dawn. The Bistro sticker was still there from last year. I took a guided tour into the Blue John Cavern near Castleton in Derbyshire. Blue John, also known as Derbyshire Spar, is a semi-precious mineral. It's only found in this cavern and the nearby Treat Cliff Cavern. Upper Mill was one of our mooring spots last year. We had to drive around a bit to find somewhere to stay, but eventually we came across the Moorcock Inn. It's just north of Clitheroe and we got there around 7 o'clock. As it turned out, we were the only guests at this large place and we had a very nice evening meal, but we did not have any hot water in the morning. After a cold shower and a good breakfast, we took off in search of Whalley Abbey. We eventually found it and spent an hour walking around the ruins. After leaving the Abbey ruins, we drove to Slaidburn in Yorkshire. Here we checked out the grammar school endowed by John Brannan in 1717, and also looked at the tombstones in St Andrew's Churchyard. I should mention that as of 2014 I'm still researching to find out if the Brennans or Brennans of Slaidburn and the Forest of Bowland are related to our family. Before leaving Slateburne, we had a pint at the Heart to Bounty pub. Next we set off for our search of Brennand or Brennand landmarks in the Forest of Bowland. The hill on the left may be Brennand Fell. As I just mentioned, I didn't take off on the trail in search of the Brennand landmarks, but I am able to show you what I would have seen thanks to the great photos taken by this person, Rambling Pete, on his hike in 2008. The following is an extract from Rambling Pete's diary. At the crest of Wind Fell, the views ahead were impressive. A deep-cut valley below with rounded fells beyond. Middle knoll prominent between the fells. I could see my route ahead, but unfortunately I had to go down a steep path to the valley floor before climbing up once more. The descent was down a steep stony path, with land slipping away below my feet. I made my way down to Brennand Farm, passing by lots of frog spawns sitting in the stream. Some of the kissing gates were surrounded by water, and it was necessary to pick your way around to avoid getting wet feet. The sheep below at the farm were pretending to be lambs, springing up, or at least trying to spring up into the air. Once past Brennand Farm, the route ascends between the fells, initially up a farm track, and then out into very boggy pasture. I'll give you a little bit of extra time to read about the centre of Great Britain, Brennand Farm. After leaving the Forest of Bowland, we drove to Holme in Westmoreland, the village where I was raised by my nan and granddad during World War II. Earlier in the day I called our friend Dorothy, who lives in the village. She insisted that we spend the night at her place. The three of us went to the Smithy for dinner, and in the evening Jeff Pegg, the local historian, stopped by and we chatted about the village and its people. The following is a family history tour of the village. During the war years I lived here with my grandparents. We had to share the toilet with the folks next door. The one that we shared is the one with the red door. Some of the Harrison and Thorpe members of my family were evacuated here during the war. My great-grandmother, Margaret Halliwell, was a very active member of the Wesleyan Methodist Church. She often gave services in this chapel, and in 1924 gave an opening dedication. In 1963, the family installed a brass communal rail in the chapel in her memory. My great-grandfather Matthew Brinnan moved here in the 1860s as an apprentice tailor. He and the family continued to live here until the 1890s. As the family grew in numbers, they moved into the larger yew tree cottage. Their next move was to Springfield House around the turn of the century. Here is a family photo taken outside the house around about that time frame. Following Matthew's death in 1904, the family moved into Broadstone House. The Reverend Thomas Croft, a distant relative, lived at the vicarage from 1860 to 1871. On the way back from Graham and Lynn's, we took a side trip to have a pint at the Rock of Gibraltar. This was one of our regular watering holes when we cruised on narrowboat Ursula.